You're now live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the County of Haliburton Land Division Committee to order. My name is Liz Danielson, and I'll be serving as the chair for today's meeting. I'd like to introduce you to the other members of the committee. Tammy McKelvey, Councillor at Large for Minden Hills, Bob Snyder, Public Member representing Highlands East, and Bill Donald, Public Member representing Algonquin Highlands. Unfortunately, Pat Kennedy, Public Member for Dysart et al., is unable to join us today. Also joining us are members of county staff, including our Director of Planning, Elizabeth Purcell, as well as our Senior Planner and Secretary Treasurer, Kim Bishop. We acknowledge that this meeting is being held in accordance with both the Planning Act and Municipal Act. I'll begin by respectfully acknowledging that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Michi-Saugig territory and in the traditional territory of the Michi-Saugig and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We'll acknowledge the shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest for items on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll proceed with the agenda. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda as circulated? Member McKelvey, Member Donald.
Moved by Member McKelvey, seconded by Member Donald. Be it resolved that the November 10th, 2025 Land Division Committee agenda be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Could I also have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of September the 9th? Moved by Member Snyder, seconded by Member Donald.
Moved by Member Snyder, seconded by Member Donald. Be it resolved that the minutes of the Land Division Committee meeting held October 12th, 2025 be approved as printed and circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. So we'll now proceed with the hearing of applications under the Planning Act. For each file, staff will provide a summary of the application and their recommendation. The committee will then have an opportunity to ask questions of staff or gain a broader understanding of the application. The applicant or agent will then have a chance to speak, followed by any members of the public wishing to comment, whether in support or against the application. Each participant will be provided 5 minutes to speak to the committee and respond to questions raised. Following all submissions related to an application, the committee will deliberate and make a decision, which may be subject to appeal as provided under the Planning Act. The first application is a consent application by McKay. The file number is H02825 for a lot addition to adjoining lands. I'll now invite Kim Bishop, our senior planner, to present the staff report.
Thank you very much, Chair Danielson. I will just share my screen. Perfect. Okay. Okay, our first application today is for a lot addition. The subject property today is part of Lot 28 Concession A in the geographic township of Sherburne and the township of Algonquin Highlands. The civic address for this property is 1019 McLennan Drive, Unit 4. This is a lot addition to adjoining lands directly to the north of the property. As a quick overview, this subject property is located in the rural lands in the county official plan. The benefiting lands are actually located in the settlement area of Dorset, and they're designated likewise the same way in the Algonquin Highlands official plan. And both the benefiting and the subject lands are zoned rural. So our application today is for a lot addition. Our subject lands currently have an area of 19.7 hectares It has no frontage on a maintained public road, so the access for this property is via McClellan Drive, which is in the township of Lake of Bays, and it is accessed via registered private right-of-way. The severed lands are just a little more than half a hectare, 5,800 square meters. These also have no road frontage. These are just, they do have some frontage on the unopened road allowance between Rideout and Sherburne, but no frontage on Highway 35. And the kind of intent here is to square up some of the lot a little bit, and then also to address some minor encroachments on the property. The benefiting property here is 22402 Highway 35. It currently has a lot area of 2.37 hectares and 286 meters of frontage on Highway 35. Once the addition is added, if permitted by the committee, its lot area will be 2.95 hectares, and there's no change to the frontage on the provincial highway here. So this is a fairly straightforward application. In terms of county policy, it is kind of wholly overall compliant. In terms of municipal policy, the municipality's planner, Sean O'Callahan, had no concerns in terms of the Algonquin Highlands, official plan, provided lot additions didn't create, any new lots floating around out there. With regard to the zoning bylaw, the benefiting parcel is considered to be compliant with the zoning bylaw. However, the retained land doesn't now and will continue to not have frontage on a maintained road, and will need some planning relief for that purpose. And so that's outlined in one of the conditions of the consent. What I will note is that condition 4 that we have in the report requires the zoning bylaw amendment for, I had accidentally written deficient lot area. It's in fact the lot frontage. So should the committee choose to support this application, we would make a minor amendment to that condition just to address frontage rather than area. We've received comments from Bell Canada who have no concerns. And the recommendation from staff today is that the application be approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. Happy to answer any questions should the committee have any.
Thanks, Kim. Do any members of the committee have questions on the application? Member Donald.
Kim, I'm not quite sure where the benefiting lands are located. They don't seem to be identified on the sketch that I see.
Let me share my screen again. 1 second. So let me go back here. So can you guys see my mouse on the screen here?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is our lands to be severed. And this is the benefiting. It's this triangular shaped lot here to the north. And so the lot addition adds, some of the land kind of in here and sort of squares this up. So the benefiting lands are up here. They have all of this frontage along Highway 35. Does that make sense?
Okay, maybe next time that can be kind of shown on one of the sketches a little bit clearer.
Sure, not a problem. The severance sketch, because the property is so large that they're doing the severance from, and the severance is quite small itself, it was kind of zoomed in. So, but I will make a note of in the future, I can mark up a little site plan to show on there to make it easier for you to determine that. But yeah, we're just adding a little bit of land to the property directly to the north.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. And I'll make note to make sure that that's clearer next time. Let me stop sharing my screen.
The other question I have deals with the zoning requirement. The property is zoned now rural with no frontage.
Mm-hmm.
When the lands are taken away, it's still going to be rural with no frontage. Why is this rezoning necessary?
Yeah, so most zoning bylaws, and I believe the Algonquin Highlands zoning bylaw is the same way, is that so these lots existed prior to the zoning bylaw existing in Algonquin Highlands. And so they are what we would call legal non-conforming or legal non-complying lots. Most zoning bylaws, because they acknowledge that you're going to have a bunch of lots that are like this, will have a provision that if you make a lot larger that doesn't comply, so say our benefiting lands may not meet the minimum requirement, say for a rural zone in terms of the lot area, because you're making it larger, they wouldn't require any planning relief, no zoning bylaw amendment or minor variance to acknowledge it. However, when you have a legal non-conforming or non-complying lot that you're making smaller, so say it didn't have much frontage and you were making it smaller, or you're reducing the lot area, because you're changing the lot, we essentially kind of from a zoning perspective have to treat it like a new lot. And as such, that's why the municipal planner at Algonquin Highlands is requesting the zoning bylaw amendment. It's a pretty standard requirement, and this would be a very straightforward zoning application for council to consider. There's no, environmental features or anything like that. It's really a technical zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay.
Member McKelvey, you had a question?
It was more of a comment. If Kim went to Appendix A on the severance sketch, it does show a little better about the benefiting lands and the severed lands. I don't know if that's an option.
Oh, on the actual application itself?
Well, in the package, it's page 7 of 15, but it's right past the key map, so I don't know if that's.
Oh, okay, hold on. Let me share a different screen.
That's
I've got a whole bunch of different screens all organized here for myself, so give me one moment. I can pull it up though, no problem. Let me see. I'm gonna drag this over here so it's easier to see. Okay, let's try this. I'm gonna share screen 1 again, or screen 2. Share. Yeah, so it's just, oh, there is a key map with it. Fair enough. I was just trying to make it fit on the display here. So yes, there is on the agenda package that was received by the committee, there is a little key map that kind of shows that parcel up here. But in the future, I'll just make sure that each and every one of them shows that when we do a lot additions, so there's no confusion for members of the committee if that works for the committee.
That's fine with me.
Any other questions?
I got a
sorry,
tiny monitor on my desktop and it's still, but thank you for looking after that.
Any other questions from committee members? Okay, if there are no further questions, we might invite the applicant's agent, Ted Williams, to speak to the application.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I don't really have anything to add. We're happy with the recommended conditions as amended, and if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions by the committee for Mr. Williams? Hearing none, could I then have a mover and a seconder to both receive the report and approve the application or recommend approval for the application? Moved by member Snyder, seconded by member McKelvey.
Okay. Moved by member Snyder, seconded by member McKelvey. Be it resolved that the Land Division Committee of the County of Haliburton receive the report related to application for consent H-028-25, and that the Land Division Committee for the County of Haliburton grant provisional consent of application for consent H-028-25, subject to the conditions of approval as amended. And I will remember this time to take a recorded vote. Member McKelvey.
Yes.
Member Donald.
Yes.
Member Snyder.
Yes.
Chair Danielson.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's carried.
That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Okay, the next consent application is file number H029 for the creation of an easement or right-of-way by Easton. So Kim, if you'd like to give us your report.
Absolutely. One moment here. Rearrange my screens again. Okay. Share this screen. Okay, so our second application for the committee's consideration today is a easement for right-of-way purposes. The subject property here is 27241 Highway 28. This property is part of Lot 32, Concession 6. I apologize, that shouldn't say Concession 32. In the geographic township of Cardiff, in the municipality of Highlands East. This is for right-of-way or easement purposes. The benefiting property is the property directly to the east, which is 27243 Highway 28. The county official plan policy here, these are in the rural lands, and in the Highlands East official plan, these are in the shoreline. In terms of the zoning, these lots are considered shoreline residential type 1. Okay, so the purpose and effect of this application is to permit an easement, really an emergency access easement actually, over 27241 Highway 28 to benefit 27243 Highway 28, which is the, as I mentioned, the lot directly to the east. So our subject lot, outlined in green on the sketch attached, has a lot area of 1,130 square meters with 27.4 meters of frontage on Potash Lake. As you can see, they don't own their shore road allowance. This property was redeveloped with a new dwelling in 2014. And the proposed easement is 70 square meters in the location of an old driveway. The benefiting lot here at 27243 Highway 28 is about double the size. It's 2295 square meters with a little under 60 meters of frontage on Potash Lake. This property was recently redeveloped with a building permit in 2024 for a new dwelling and guest cabin. So in terms of the kind of the policy direction here, both of these properties have existing legal access from Highway 28 at those sort of civic addresses that I outlined there. Anybody who, I'm not sure if anybody had a chance to go out and take a look, they have very steep approaches from Highway 28 and the entrances are quite close together. These wouldn't be entrances that would typically meet standard today, but these are existing lots of record. So in terms of the county's policy, we're not creating any new private roads or anything like that by doing this. The ask actually comes from the property owner because they own both of these lots and they're going to sell 27241. And when they redeveloped the benefiting lot in 2024, they actually buried the cable or buried the hydro and it goes across the driveway. So their concern is that if there was ever a scenario where the whole thing had to be torn up to address an issue with the hydro, they wanted to have the easement for the benefit of access in that scenario. If you are out on site, you will note that there are sort of some just very rudimentary board fences kind of along the lot lines. So the suggestion there would be that this is not something somebody would be using every day because those folks put the fence up and they intend to keep the fence up. In terms of the local policy, a really bright local planner named Kim Roberts, I've never met her, she wrote the planning report for it. So Highlands East had no concerns here as well. Very straightforward application. The only condition in there was that because there was a consolidation of a number of little lots here to make some of these lots, was that the applicants provide a surveyor's real property report to show where the structures were on the property. And that's actually what they've utilized as their severance sketch today. So that'll just go to the township as something to be fulfilled to their satisfaction. So otherwise, we very much have the standard issue conditions that you would normally have. In terms of comments, we received comments from Bell Canada and Crow Valley Conservation Authority, who is the conservation authority in effect for the area of Potash Lake. Neither of those agencies had any concerns. So no concerns in terms of Oh, let me get out of that. No concerns in terms of the policy, and the recommendation here would be that I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. The recommendation here would be that we approve subject to the conditions in the application.
Do members of the committee have any questions for staff? Hearing none, I believe that the applicant is in attendance today. If you want to bring him in, if he wishes to make any comments.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Mr. Easton,
Yes, yes. I'm sorry, a little trouble here with the microphone. Um,
we can hear you.
all right, good. Thank you for reviewing this. Greatly appreciated. I really don't have anything to add. The family's been there for a very long time, and we decided to develop the larger property next door. But it exactly as she said, if there ever was a problem, all the wires are buried under the parking lot of the old place. So we thought we ought to get a proper easement just to avoid any controversy in the future.
Do any members of the committee have questions for Mr. Easton? Hearing none, Kim, is there anyone else online who wishes to comment on the application?
I don't believe we have any other attendees for this file.
Okay, if there are no further questions, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the report and provide provisional approval of the application? Mover and a seconder, Member Donald, seconded by Member Snyder.
Okay. Moved by Member Donald, second by Member Snyder. Be it resolved that the Land Division Committee of the County of Haliburton received the report related to application for consent H-032-25, and that the Land Division Committee for the County of Haliburton grant provisional consent of application H-032, 25, subject to the conditions of approval. I'll ask for a recorded vote. Member McKelvey.
Yes.
Member Donald.
Yes.
Member Snyder.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Chair Danielson.
Yes,
That's carried. Thank you.
that's carried.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next application is file number H035 for a lot addition to adjoining lands by Romberger.
Okay. So this application H-035/25 is for the lands of Romberger. It is a lot addition to adjoining lands. This property is located in part of lot 22, concession 4 in the geographic township of Minden, in the township of Minden Hills. The civic address here is 1110 Strawberry Drive. The benefiting parcel is a vacant lot that gets referred to as 2 Sugarbush Lane in some of the documentation. The county official plan policy here is the rural lands, and the Minden Hills official plan policies that are appropriate here are the waterfront. The zoning here is a mix, so the area directly along the shore is zoned shoreline residential, and the kind of backlot portion of this property is zoned to an RU or rural designation. Okay, so the subject property. Apologies to the committee. We had a little confusion with this application because there was an inconsistency in the lot area that was in the planning report that was received with the application that was also reviewed at Minden Hills, and our intrepid director of planning caught it right when we published the agenda. So what we have here, so 1110 Strawberry Drive is a lot that's 1.08 hectares in area. The intent is to do it appears to be an approximately 2,400 square meter or 0.24 hectare lot addition to the lot next door. That would result in a lot area of 0.84 hectares. No frontage will change for either of these parcels. The frontages will remain as they are. So for the subject property, that's 35.8 meters of frontage on Lake Shigawigamog. This property has no public road frontage. Access is via registered private right-of-way. Strawberry Drive comes back out to County Road 21. So the retained lands, 1110 Strawberry Drive, are developed with a dwelling, a guest cabin, a shoreline, and kind of the various shoreline accessory structures, and is like fairly well developed. It's that lot is built out. The severed lands, it's an area of approximately 2,400 square meters, no road or lake frontage here. Like the other lot, this property accesses from Sugarbush Lane. Sugarbush can access either from Strawberry Drive or from Sugarbush Lane itself, both of which feed back out to County Road 21. And I've got a couple pictures here just to note. So where the lot addition is taking place, it's very topographically separate or distinct from the retained land. So when you come onto this property, the retained land is a bit of a lower area. It's quite flat. And then where we look up into this hillside, this is the area that the applicants intend to add to the vacant lot next door, which maintains kind of a similar sort of height of land elevation. Oh, sorry. There we go. So the lot addition is to benefit the lands next door. There was a sketch that came with the application. I have doctored it up a little bit just for presentation purposes, just because it was a lot of gray on gray, just for clarity's sake. So the benefiting lot is outlined in purple here. This is the vacant lot. The green is our subject property. And that lot addition is that long rectangle outlined in red on here. And then kind of the purpose of this application is that the applicants wish to construct a roughly 70 by 34 square foot or a 70 foot by 34 foot new dwelling. That's an area of approximately 2,380 or 2,400 square feet. And in sort of the application materials received from the applicant's planner, the lot addition was to permit sort of an appropriate lot area that would minimize sort of digging, blasting, that kind of thing in the waterfront area. So in terms of this application, the pre-consultation report, there were some concerns about compliance and conformity with the official plan policy because it is a lot addition to essentially create a building envelope on a cold water lake, trout lake at capacity, which is what Kashagawagamog is. There was some question as to whether or not it required an environmental impact study or not. Typically, the Minden Hills official plan would require sort of a site evaluation report, and where you had more sensitive features, say the lake that is at capacity for development, you may require an EIS. So Minden Hills endorsed it sort of subject to conditions, and one of them was sort of if it needed these studies and this and a severance agreement to go with it, those would be conditions of that approval. We did circulate Ministry of Natural Resources and MECP. They confirmed that they had no real concerns or comments because we're not creating a new building lot. The building lot is there. So I did speak to both the planner and then the manager of planning at Minden Hills. This will require a zoning bylaw amendment to be permitted. That's one of the conditions of consent. And so we had added, I had added a condition that, you know, a site evaluation be done to the satisfaction of the Township of Minden Hills. The planner who will speak to her position, she doesn't consider that a necessary condition here. So really the recommendation to the committee is that you approve subject to these conditions. For clarity, the site evaluation report is mostly because municipal staff had some concerns about sort of the adequacy of the site. It's quite steep. There's steep slopes. They had to do a lot addition in order to build on it. And if you look, the current location of the proposed building is underneath the existing hydro line. I don't believe it's subject to an easement, so these folks may be in a position to move that hydro line ultimately if they want to. I'm sure the planner can speak to that as well. The planner, I think, is, her direction will be that she'll ask that conditions 2 and 4, which are that site evaluation report and severance agreement, be removed from or amended from the conditions. So that's my recommendation. I'm happy to answer questions if the committee has them.
Any questions from committee members? Member McKelvey.
So the number 2, where it says they have to have a site evaluation report, you're thinking Minden's going to waive that? Is that what I understood you to mean, Kim?
So when I read the pre-consultation report, my understanding of it was that a site evaluation report is a typical requirement for any development proposal in Minden in the waterfront area. They also did talk about having concerns about sort of the adequacy of that site. And when I say that, I'm not talking about wetlands or things like that. I mean, ultimately, slopes. Can you put a septic up there? Those sorts of things. And those are typically the things that we would look for a site evaluation report to give us some direction or some information on. And so because there was that concern outlined in the report, it was made clear by the Ministry of Environment and MNRF that they didn't see the concern that would raise it to the level of needing an environmental impact study, but they didn't really comment on the adequacy of the site for development, just impacts on the lake. So ultimately, it's up to the committee to determine whether or not they want to waive that condition. Because this requires a zoning bylaw amendment application, local municipal staff will have to review the complete application requirements for a ZBA in that case. They may need to do a site evaluation report for the zoning. But I can't speak certainly for what they review when they receive a full application. So I just wanted to give the heads up that there has been a little bit of discussion back and forth about those conditions. I don't think the site evaluation is an unreasonable condition, but it's up to the committee to ultimately determine if, that's something that you guys think would be valuable in having at this point.
Questions from the committee members? Hearing done, I understand that the agent for the applicant is here, Melissa Markham. We can ask her to invite her in to speak to the application. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Melissa Markham Planning, 1025 Rebecca Lane, Huntsville, Ontario, P1H2J6. As the senior planner for the County Haliburton provided, the application before you is for a lot addition to adjacent lands. The lands both have frontage on Cashawiggamog Lake, and the application proposes to sever a parcel of land for a lot addition. And as you heard, that is to facilitate the future development of the subject lands, which currently exist and do have development ability at this point. As you heard from the senior planner, pre-consultation comments were provided by the township. These include that there be a requirement that the benefiting lands be rezoned. This is to bring all of the lands into the shoreline residential zone, as they are currently dual zone shoreline residential and rural. Through the comments of the township, they recommended, and they didn't provide any comments at that time or conditions, they just recommend information be provided by the MNRF and MECP as to whether an EIS would be required. And that's included within the Township of Minden Hills staff report. They were just looking to see that the severance for lot addition conform with the policy directions. I did reach out to both MNRF and MECP, and along with the senior planner, who also reached out to these agencies, they did confirm that they didn't have any concerns with the application, and no EIS was requested by either one of these agencies. As the senior planner noted, the township further noted that there's a hydro line located on the subject lands, and that is in the approximate location of the proposed dwelling. There were also comments that were provided with the application to the county that the owners of the property have been in discussions with hydro. They have paid a deposit, and they're working with them to complete their necessary steps to relocate that hydro line on the property to allow for the development. And there is no easement that would need to be changed for that. Once again, they're working with hydro to relocate those lines, which is the only other comment that Minden Hills had provided in their staff report. The owners and I have read the staff report that was attached to the agenda for today's meeting, and we do agree with the recommendation to approve the application. However, as your senior planner mentioned, when the agenda was posted on Friday, there were just some questions with regards to condition 2 and condition 4, which were not proposed by the township. They were not included in the staff report by the township. So we're just looking for that condition not to move forward and not to be included in the provisional decision. As I mentioned, the Township of Minden Hills brought forward a resolution, and that was on September 11th of this year. And this was from their planning consultants that had reviewed this application. They recommended approval of the application, once again demonstrating conformity with the official plan. And it was subject to conditions outlined in the pre-consultation report. They provided that based on planning review, endorsements recommended, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. As I provided, condition 2 and 4 that have been included in the County of Haliburton staff report were not included as recommended conditions by the Township of Minden Hills in their report. They were solely looking for confirmation from MECP and MNRF with regards to whether these studies would be requested through the application. The County of Haliburton is also asking for the Township of Minden Hill to clear those conditions. So obviously those are conditions that are being put forward for the Township of Minden Hills. Once again, conditions that weren't asked for in that pre-consultation report. I'm requesting that condition 2 and 4 be removed from the provisional approval. As I included in the agenda package, condition 2, as submitted by staff, requires a site evaluation report. It doesn't provide that this is to the satisfaction of the township. This is requiring a site evaluation report, as I provided, was not a recommendation for a condition by the township. And condition 4 states that the owner shall enter into a severance agreement, including the recommendations of the site evaluation report. Once again, as provided by the township pre-consultation conditions, there was no requirement for a site evaluation. It's not included within the recommended conditions. It was just information that was to be looked for from the MECP and MNRF. Once again, in the Township of Minden Hill staff report that was provided by their planning consultants, they don't look at lot addition applications as being development, and they were just looking for confirmation from those ministries with regards to whether they would be looking at that. Once again, the benefiting lands are currently existing. They have the ability to be developed at this point, and the lot addition is essentially creating a more suitable building envelope for the future development of a dwelling on those properties. Here today looking for committee's approval, subject to that change for condition 2 and 4 as provided. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Questions from committee members for the agent? Member Snyder.
Can you just, thank you. Can you clarify for me, is the hydro line, is it a private line or is it a hydro line?
Through you, Chair, it is a hydro line that goes through the subject property.
And so without an easement, at the moment, if the cost or timing is too difficult with hydro to move it, I'm assuming then that they could build in what would normally be the easement area, because there is no easement. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, there is no easement that's on the property, so would really just have to maintain the setbacks as required from hydro from those poles. As I mentioned, though, the owners are working with hydro to relocate, and they have put down deposits. And as I said, they're just completing the remaining steps for the relocation of those hydro lines. But that is correct. The subject lands exist without the lot addition. As long as they meet the setbacks that are required by hydro, they could build on the property without that being relocated.
Okay. And my final question is, has there been any work put towards identifying a septic site?
Through you, Chair, at this point, we were looking for just the dwelling location. I don't believe that there was an issue with septic, but that hasn't been included. I'm sure that will be looked at by the township through the rezoning application.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the agent? Hearing none, I'm inclined to, unless I hear otherwise from committee members, to include the conditions that have been recommended by our senior planner. But I'd like to hear some comments with respect to that. Member McKelvey?
I don't see the reason to leave it because it wasn't requested of Minden Hills. It was just basically get a clarification from the ministries whether or not that needed to happen. So I'm trying to understand why this was put in if it wasn't Minden Hills condition. So I don't know if Kim can elaborate on that again. I'm getting confused on who requested what.
Sure. So when I reviewed the staff report prepared by the planning consultants and this went to the September 11th meeting, we have a revised copy. And so when I reviewed this, functionally, the direction is basically that the site evaluation report would typically be required in the waterfront designation. Kashega is also identified as sort of a sensitive natural heritage feature, which is what would sort of raise the standard from SCR to EIS. I guess I'll just sort of like read sort of the applicant is provided according to the staff report here. I understand that Ms. Markham has a different sort of perspective, that the current benefiting parcel cannot support the proposed development due to topography of the lands. And then they wanted the confirmation from MNRF and MECP that they didn't need an environmental impact study. Then when we get sort of down into the recommendation, was that sort of that they get confirmation that an environmental impact study, whether or not that's needed from MNRF and MECP, and if required, an EIS be prepared. And then in terms of the actual recommended conditions of council or to council was that condition number 3, that a severance agreement be registered against the property subject to the recommendations of the EIS and SCR if required, and to the satisfaction of the township. And so when I looked at this kind of on a whole, it was a little bit unclear. What was clear to me is sort of that Minden Hills does have a fairly clear policy direction that waterfront development applications, and it is a development application, even if it is a lot addition, especially if the lot addition is required to make a lot more buildable, that we would typically do an SCR to make sure that, we have things like adequate septic locations. We have concerns about the constraints of the lot. Ultimately, if the only location to put a 2,400 square foot house is directly in the location underneath an existing hydro line, which would be very sort of time consuming and costly to relocate. And so for that reason, it was added in there because I wanted to make sure I was covering our bases in terms of what Minden Hills may require to process a zoning bylaw amendment. Ultimately, I did speak to the manager of planning at Minden Hills. She advised that certainly a site evaluation report would be helpful in evaluating those things. She doesn't have a zoning application in front of her, so she can't make comment on that sort of right now. But ultimately, they can review these things at the zoning phase as well if the committee is inclined to remove those 2 conditions. So unfortunately, I don't think the recommendation from the planning consultant was super clear. But sort of when I reviewed all of it, my concern was that it's not a small parcel, but ultimately that location where they want to put it is probably a very constrained spot. And there's a lot of sort of just bald-faced rock in that area. And so I wanted to make sure that in terms of the slopes, in terms of making sure we had an adequate location to put a septic system, those sort of things, that those would be addressed if we were going to be doing a consent really to permit a specific building envelope that these folks are after. So that's my rationale. I can appreciate Ms. Markham's position, and ultimately the Township of Minden Hills will address the developability of the lot, certainly at the zoning bylaw phase, but generally we don't want to recommend approval for something here at the county level that, may leave some questions up in the air in terms of that. So I hope that answers Member McKelvey's question. It was a little bit long-winded and I apologize.
The more detail we have, the better. Any other questions, or do other members have concerns with the conditions? Member Snyder.
Thank you. I don't have a concern with the condition. There's some constraints on the property And it would be good for, I think, for everyone, if they're identified and development proceeds appropriately after for that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Member McKelvey.
Can we at least change the wording of number 4 where it says the registered owner shall enter into a severance agreement? Can we soften that may have to, like this gives no leniency for any kind of a decision by Minden Hills to decide whether they really want a severance agreement. This is saying that they shall have one.
So through you, Chair Danielson, we could revise that condition just to be the registered owner shall enter into a severance agreement with the Township of Minden Hills pursuant to Section 5126 of the Planning Act to address all planning matters, including but not limited to the recommendations of the site evaluation report if required. So simply, if it's required, then that would be kind of the language. If it's not required and Minden Hills doesn't need it, or the site evaluation finds there's no issue with this property, we have no recommendations, there's no requirement that you enter into a report or that you enter into an agreement on that regard.
Member Donald.
Kim, basically all we're doing here is we're moving a piece of land from one property to another. We're not issuing a building permit. We're not making a recommendation with respect to the appropriateness of a septic tank location. Is that basically what we're doing, just moving a piece of land? And are we getting these recommendation 2 and 4? Are we kind of moving beyond the mandate?
Through to Member Donald, I wouldn't consider it beyond the mandate because ultimately the application has a purpose when we move land around. And the purpose here is to have a kind of an appropriate development envelope. And so all aspects of the development envelope certainly are things we can review. Whether or not the committee considers that, what they want to get into with that application is really with the committee, although I see our Director of Planning has a comment.
Ms. Purcell.
Thank you, Chair Danielson. Just a quick comment. I suppose perhaps it should just be noted that typically an abnormal lot configuration that would result should the lot addition be granted and finalized normally wouldn't be, I guess, recommended if there isn't a specific purpose for it. So without doing the due diligence to ensure that, in fact, that area can be adequately developed with structure, as would be explored through something like a site evaluation report, it would sort of unnecessarily leave an odd configuration for a site if it turns out that area can't be developed. So that's generally why we request to have that due diligence done at this phase instead of perhaps down the line at the building permit stage or something like that. And turns out this wasn't necessary. I think it's just a much preferred route to ensure that what is being conveyed, and obviously even for the landowners themselves, they would be undertaking a financial encumbrance having to purchase this lot addition. And if it ends up they can't even use it for development through the investigatory phase of the lot, it is kind of a lot of work and a lot of fees for no purpose if that area can't be developed in the end.
Other comments or questions? It sounded like, Member McKelvey, you were relatively satisfied with the suggested rewording that Kim offered.
Yes,
So,
I'm still questioning the need for it, but I would like at least change that it's if necessary.
right, okay. Any further questions or comments by committee members? Hearing none, I would look for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, subject to the conditions as slightly amended. And give provisional approval. Moved by Member Snyder, seconded by Member McKelvey.
I guess this is the point where I read a resolution.
That's great.
Thank you. So moved by Member Snyder, seconded by Member McKelvey. Be it resolved that the Land Division Committee of the County of Haliburton receive the report related to application for consent H03525, and that the Land Division Committee for the County of Haliburton grant provisional approval of application for consent H-03525, subject to the conditions of approval as amended. Condition 4 will add, if necessary, to the requirement for a severance agreement under Section 5126 of the Planning Act.
And the vote?
Oh, and we have to do a recorded vote. My goodness, I am slow today. I do apologize. Member McKelvey.
Yes.
Member Donald.
Abstain.
Okay. Member Snyder.
Yes.
Chair Danielson.
Yes.
Carries.
That's carried. Member Donald, I'm sure you acknowledge that an abstention is actually a no vote.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, committee.
When we're finished with the applications before us, I would like us to have a brief conversation on the requirement for a recorded vote or not, just so that everyone's clear on that. It's something we can talk about it when we're finished the applications. So the final application is a consent application, two applications, 03325 and 03425 by Miller's Lake Conservation for a new lot and a lot addition. So I'd ask Kim to provide her report.
Aye. Thank you very much, committee. So our last two applications today are H03325 and H03425. This is to permit a lot addition and a new lot, a new shoreline lot on Guilford Lake. The subject property here is a large acreage parcel that is vacant. Its description is part of lots 31 through 34, concession 8 in the geographic township of Guilford in the municipality of Dysart et al. Address, as I mentioned here, it is vacant, but the property is accessed via both Preacher's Lane, which is a private road, and Boyce Bradley Drive, which is also a private road that travels back out to County Road 14 or Haliburton Lake Road. The county official plan policy here, these are in the rural lands, and in the municipality of Dysart et al. These are in the waterfront areas and rural areas. And the whole of the property right now is zoned RU1L, which is rural type 1L. The L is limited service. So this is a rural lot that does not have frontage or access along a maintained public road. Right. Okay. So there's two parts to this application. I'm going to start with the lot addition because it's a little more straightforward. So there's a severance sketch on the screen here. So all of the subject property, the retained lands are outlined in the green. Boyce Bradley Drive is this teal color. It is a private road that travels through the subject property, so it's a right-of-way. Preacher's Lane is a private right-of-way that is separately owned from the property. It's in purple here. And then we have two proposals. So the first is the creation of a new lot. That's our area outlined in red. And then the other is a lot addition, which are the two small parts here. So the purpose of the lot addition here is it's a small area. It's a almost 1,200 square meters, and it's comprised of the westmost part of the waterfront portion of this property. If you go out to the site, this section here that they're proposing to do as a lot addition is very, very steep. And in the Dysart et al. Official plan, they actually have policies around steep slopes. They call them area of use limitations in the waterfront area. And so what they intend to do with this area is it's actually intended to be added to the right-of-way for Preacher's Lane, which is maintained by the Cottage Owners Association, and then rezoned to an open space designation, so that it would be sort of maintained in a natural state in perpetuity. The intent here is that where the new waterfront lot would be created sort of directly east of that, it would create just sort of a standard natural buffer between this lot and the developed waterfront lot that's located further to the west. So in terms of the new lot, they would be creating a severed lot that's bound by Preacher's Lane on the south side, and the Boyce Bradley Drive on the northeast side. And what happens here essentially is we're looking at a little under 0.7 hectare lot. It would have 77 meters of frontage on Guilford Lake. The applicants are in the process of closing and purchasing their shoreline road allowance. So that road allowance purchase area and frontage have been added into all of our calculations because that's what the resultant lots will look like. As mentioned previously, access here is via the Boyce Bradley Drive and Preacher's Lane. The driveway for this property is actually existing and comes in right here, just as you come off of Preacher's Lane. There is a wetland feature, which is located to the north. You can see it sort of here. And because of that, they did undertake an environmental impact study / site evaluation report that was prepared by Riverstone Environmental. It provided a number of recommendations to develop the lot in a manner that has no negative impacts on the lake, the adjacent wetland, or potential animal or species at risk habitat. So some of those recommendations include a 30-meter setback to both the wetland and the shoreline of the lake. It would also include requiring that there be no clearing or anything like that within the wetland buffer area. That would allow to make sure that any development up there would be sort of appropriately attenuated. The site evaluation and EIS also includes recommendations in terms of docking because the shoreline along this lake here is type 1 critical fish habitat. So that means it's habitat that's sort of considered to be highly productive or is otherwise, particularly good for spawning and raising the fish habitat, the fish that live in this lake. The other note is that while there were none found on site, there was a species at risk evaluation undertaken as part of this, and there are some recommendations in terms of when we're clearing, when we're developing, those sorts of things, to make sure we're not negatively impacting any animal habitat. All of those recommendations would be enshrined in both a zoning bylaw amendment that would sort of incorporate those setbacks, but that would also a severance agreement under 5126 of the Planning Act, where those would be put on title. So that's all well and good. The property is also located within 300 meters of a mineral aggregate operation. The county's official plan restricts the development of new residential lots within 300 meters of the licensed boundary of an aggregate operation. The applicants did prepare a land use compatibility assessment that was attached to the agenda for the committee to review. But sort of in short, there is a Class A gravel pit located to the northeast. I've just shown it on an air photo here, so it gives a better kind of idea in terms of what's here. So this is a Class A pit operated by Blair Sand and Gravel. Right now, kind of the active portion of this pit is well removed from the subject property. It's about 300 meters away. However, this whole area is licensed. And so this is a Class A pit. I'm sure the committee is aware, but just if anybody isn't, there are essentially two types of gravel pits that we can be licensed under the Aggregate Resources Act. The first is a type A pit, which permits the withdrawal or removal of more than 200 or more than 20,000 tons of material from the pit, or B pits, which are typically smaller operations that have a max ceiling of 20,000 tons of material to be removed from them. At this time, this pit is not a super productive pit, but it is licensed sort of for that use, for that to be the case down the road. And the licensed area comes approximately 200 feet, 65 meters from the boundary of this property. So in preparing a land use compatibility assessment, there were recommendations from the consultant. So they recommended, so they did note that as of right now, there is another, what they call a sensitive receptor. There's another house that's closer to the pit than this property. And there are some developed lots down here. There have been no complaints to date. Nobody has sort of any concerns at this time. What they did note, though, is that, were the extractive envelope to be expanded further south, as it is permitted under the Act at this time, there could be some potential incompatibilities or issues in terms of noise, dust, vibration. Specifically, they recommend that a berm be placed, an earthen berm be placed along the kind of the northeast side of that development envelope. That would require that the site development plan, we just go back here, would require some reshuffling, because as you can see right here, this is your wetland setback, and we can't mess with that. And we've got the edge of the house pretty tight to it right here. So typically you would probably be looking at siting your berm kind of in this area. So you'd have to reshuffle where your structures are going to go on that lot. If the committee were to choose to support this application, one of the proposed conditions would be that the site development plan be revised to incorporate all of those recommendations into it. The second was that it recommended registering a notice for noise against the new lot. I did do a little bit of investigation. The Land Registry Office won't actually allow you to register a notice for noise. It's not a title issue. I guess that's the argument they make. You can incorporate sort of cautions for noise or environmental sound as part of a development agreement, so part of the severance agreement, but you can't do something where sort of like right at the top of the parcel register when you purchase it, it says notice, and then when you open that, it says it may be loud, it may be dusty. It would have to be something that would be incorporated into a development agreement for the property. So this is just to give a little bit of perspective. On the left, we have the view of the property sort of from Boyce Bradley Drive. You can see it's reasonably treed, but not heavily treed. This time of year, I went in October, there's fairly good view sort of from the road into where that development envelope would be. And then we've got the view from basically the driveway at Preacher's Lane, sort of this is where the proposed development envelope would more or less sit. So there is a cleared area, that appears to sort of meet the environmental setbacks required. So that being said, the environmental aspect of this in terms of the recommendations of the site evaluation report and the EIS, excellent. If those were incorporated, it's very well done. It's very, it's a very workable envelope. Staff do have concerns about, unfortunately, the gravel pit. Today there is not an impact. There's not many trucks up and down that road. It's a very narrow road. If anybody's been up the Boyce Bradley Drive before, it's quite narrow and it's a bit windy. The provincial planning statement and our county official plan are quite clear that sort of we shouldn't be creating new lots that have sensitive receptors on them. So places where people are going to rest their heads at night and where people are going to, be hanging out. And for that reason, because this is going to create a new lot that sort of is subject to development there, staff are not in a position to support the new lot application because it does sort of straightforwardly conflict with what we consider to be very clear provincial and county policy. That said, I know the agent for the applicant and the applicant are in attendance today. And I have, should the council, should the committee wish to grant a provisional consent here, I have included what I would consider to be conditions that would address these matters and these issues kind of to the best degree we could, with the understanding that they may never expand that pit all the way down there. They may do it, and there may be a conflict. So I won't go through all of the conditions sort of as a whole, but sort of some of the notes here would be they would be required to do the ZBA. They would be required to revise their site development plan to show that earthen berm where that would be located in terms of attenuating noise and dust from the road. We would require that they enter into a severance agreement. That would be typical for an environmental impact study that has a lot of recommendations anyway, but this one would specifically include a notice regarding potential environmental noise, dust, vehicle, and vibration impacts on the severed lot. And then we would also ask that the agreement be registered against the retained lands, requiring that they are maintained in an undeveloped state until such a time as the aggregate operation is exhausted and the license is extinguished. Mr. Hungerford, who is the agent, and the property owner, Mr. Hoskins, can speak to the proposed use of the retained lands. They're wanting to keep it for conservation purposes. So I don't see that being an issue for them. And so the hope would be that would sort of, to the best degree possible, mitigate those concerns. However, staff do have to caution that because the recommendation of that report prepared by the expert was that there would potentially be impacts on that lot. The policy exists specifically to avoid that type of impact, so staff are not in a position to support it. Otherwise, Dysart et al. Did endorse it, subject to conditions. We have not received any agency or public comments to date, and so our staff recommendation today would be to grant provisional approval of the lot addition. There's no issues there. There's no concerns. We're not creating a development envelope. But the recommendation of staff today would be to deny the provisional approval of the application for consent for the new lot based on the potential for incompatibility between the new residential lot and the existing mineral aggregate operation. I'm happy to answer questions should the committee have any.
Questions from the committee? Member McKelvey.
Kim, in the number 6 condition, if we agreed to do the new lot, you're proposing conditions, and it talks about the agreement will be registered against the retained lands, requiring that they remain undeveloped. Like, if it's an existing lot of record, which it will be still, how can you make it undevelopable without just making it rezoned to open space or something instead of saying you cannot ever develop on it?
So to Member McKelvey's point, did go back and forth a little bit about this. So one, the problem here is that, so this parcel right now has development rights. As a rural type 1 limited service lot, they're permitted to put a dwelling on that lot somewhere. This lot existed long before we had provincial policy to try to address the incompatibilities between industrial uses like mineral aggregate and residential uses. And long before we had policies to try to protect mineral aggregate operations from sort of the creep or encroachment of new residential uses. So they could today put a cottage or a home anywhere on that 200 acres that they have there today. Ultimately, if it's just a requirement to rezone to open space, somebody could certainly just 2 years later try to rezone it to something else. The concern here ultimately is that if the committee would like to, go ahead and approve this, we would want to have something to basically say, this out of this existing lot of record, this is where we want the house to be. This is where we're putting it. We're putting it on this lot. The rest of it will be maintained in an undeveloped state. That doesn't mean they couldn't forest it or things like that. We would not be permitting residential development. The reason for that is that sort of otherwise the recommendation is no, because I mean they can't put 2 houses on it right now. because a portion of that is in the waterfront and it has no frontage on a public road. So what this would do is trying to balance sort of, you can exercise that development right here, and we can create that new lot, and you can keep the retained lands for those kind of environmental purposes that they want to do, and that any future development can't happen until that aggregate operation, which sort of the provincial policy says we should protect, has been exhausted. Because someday they will run out of aggregate in that pit. So that's it. Basically, the recommendation there in that severance agreement would be to sterilize the development ability of that backlot, which is more or less in line with what I believe the applicants want to do anyway. So that would be why we recommended, because it's not a lot of record once you've taken the severance off. So we've got to kind of address that. It's a new lot and it can be subject to new conditions.
Member McKelvey.
I understand all that, but I don't believe an agreement can sterilize a lot, like only zoning. I mean, if this was zoned rural and the person, after these things went through, the person could apply for a building permit. A severance agreement, I don't believe, can take the rights of someone the way a zoning can. So I just question whether you can even put an
So
agreement.
they are rezoning the retained lands as well. So that's condition number 4. So that just means that if somebody buys it from them down the road, the severance agreement says this is what we agreed to create the lot. That's all.
And if I may ask another question, the Dysart didn't have a problem with this, from what I've read. So I'm just confused as to the difference between the county and Dysart.
So I can't speak specifically to the municipality of Dysart. Our county official plan policy about development within, like new lot development within 300 meters of a aggregate operation is pretty firm. It's a shall not. Dysart does have some language within their official plan that sort of lets things be sort of subject to a study. And to be honest, say that this was a Class B pit and the actual licensed boundary was 200 meters away, and it was never going to sort of have that kind of, and the recommendation says, you don't need a berm, you don't need to register a notice. I think that's something that, maybe that staff and the committee could take on board and say, well, in the balance of things, we've had consideration for it, we've given regard to that policy, and here's our decision. Unfortunately, in the case of reviewing this recommendation from the report, it does advise that there may be impacts in terms of noise and vibration, and particularly trucks on the road. And 200 feet in terms of a resource-based recreational use like a cottage, where the expectation is peace and quiet, and then, essentially having kind of a 200-foot, 250-foot setback to what could be a very loud, noisy aggregate operation, that's where the concern kind of comes in for county staff. So, I understand there are a balance of interest, which is why I included proposed conditions to consider if the committee did want to go that way. But in my review, and I did discuss it with our director, our policy and the provincial policy is really aimed at trying to protect aggregate operations from sort of this creep of residential development getting closer and closer to them, which creates these inevitable land use incompatibilities.
Member Donald.
Kim, is all of the retained lands within the setback limit?
Most of them are, not all of it, but they intend to rezone all of it to open space because they don't want anybody building on it anyway.
But 6 says the retained lands, if they're outside the setback limit, whether the owners want to rezone it open space or not, aren't we kind of overstepping the issue?
So through to member Donald, I'm not terribly certain that once you get out of that 300 meters, we have good access to that portion of it. It's a very sort of there's a right of way that sort of runs through there to provide access to those waterfront lots, and some of the frontage along there for that that large parcel. But I'm not entirely certain that all of the area outside of there would be workable. So, I mean, certainly a consideration, but yeah, I'm not sure that they would be able to develop it residentially, but I'm not sure.
But isn't that the municipality's call, not the county's call?
They could look at, I mean, they're going to do a zoning bylaw amendment, so I guess they can rezone it to their satisfaction.
Yeah, okay.
Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair Danielson. Just to echo some of Kim's comments, staff provided a set of conditions should committee wish to grant approval of the application. And that, again, reiterating what Kim said, is simply due to, as planners, we look at situations in a very limited scope. So for this sort of application, our scope is really limited to what the provincial planning statement says. We recognize that committee looks at a much wider variety of factors when considering applications. Planning staff, it's very, very much so limited to the PPS. So for us, the PPS is black and white. However, we do think that there is a path forward should committee consider the application. It might not be ideal for whoever ends up living there in the future. However, there is a path that we think can address a variety of matters in relation to the proposal. So taking that into consideration, there are conditions that can be implemented that address these matters should committee want to consider the applications. So just wanted to reiterate, we are a very scoped view of proposals, and so absolutely. And if there's any conditions that committee would like added or changed, we can absolutely discuss that as well.
So we, well, I suppose first, before I kind of try and wrap this up, we should allow the applicant and his agent an opportunity to speak. Good afternoon, Mr. Hungerford.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Danielson, committee members and county staff. My name is Peter Hungerford, and I am the registered principal planner with MP Planning and Associates. Our firm address is 44 King William Street, Unit A in Huntsville, Ontario, P1H1G3. And we're appearing today on behalf of our client, Mr. Eric Hoskins, for the Millers Lake Cottagers Association and the Millers Lake Conservation Association, who own the subject property, generally located on the north and south side of Preachers Lane, generally west of Boyce Bradley Drive. As county staff have outlined, the purpose of these applications is to seek approval of 2 proposed severances, and ultimately we will be seeking a rezoning, to permit the creation of 1 new residential lot and to provide for the consolidation of surplus lands with both Preachers Lane and with the large retained parcel owned by the association, largely located to the south. County staff have noted that currently the entire parcel can be developed for a residential use, and these applications would provide for that residential use and make that use subject to a set of recommended conditions. Concurrently, as has been noted, we have submitted applications to acquire the shoreline road allowance and to allocate portions of it to join with the severed lot and with the other lands that are being consolidated with Preachers Lane and with the larger retained parcel to the south. The planning merits associated with these applications are outlined in the staff reports and were outlined in our planning justification report. And the recommendations that have been prepared by ourselves and with the county planner, with whom we've consulted, are before the committee. The county staff report presents a comprehensive review of all the planning policy and concluded, as we did, that the proposal is generally consistent with that set of planning policies. And we believe that the issues identified relating to the existing pit and quarry can be adequately addressed by way of the conditions set out in the supporting studies and contained in the staff report, enabling future potential of that pit to be preserved. And I believe essentially the planning policies that the county planner outlined are intended to ensure that pit potential can be preserved, given the strategic nature of aggregate resources in Ontario. The supporting studies that were completed included, as was noted, an environmental impact report prepared by Riverstone Environmental and an impact assessment of the pit and quarry, which is in general proximity to the lands. Again, these reports concluded that, subject to the recommendations presented in the reports and the staff report, that the severance and the proposed residential use is appropriate for the development of the property. We note that Dysart et al. Have also endorsed these applications. In conclusion, we are requesting that the committee give consideration to approving these applications, subject to the sets of conditions that have been recommended by county staff, which we also endorse. So in closing, I would thank the chairperson, committee members, and staff for their time and their consideration in regards to both of these applications. You may have some questions of me, and I believe our client, Eric Hoskins, is also in attendance, who may wish to speak on what the intended use of the Conservation Authority, Conservation Association's plans are for the bulk of the retained lands. Well, thank you again.
So is there someone else in attendance who wishes to speak to the application?
Chairman Danielson, I believe Eric Hoskins was going to be in attendance. I'm just not sure if he's zoomed in.
Yes, Chair Danielson. Mr. Hoskins is in the attendee panel. However, he declined to speak.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions from the members of Mr. Hungerford? Member Snyder.
Thank you. So the recommendations is one of the recommendations is a berm to isolate the property from whatever pit noise there might be. Is there still a development site with the berm there?
Well, the height of the berm hasn't been specified and how it's to be constructed. I'm sorry.
I shut my phone off, but I can't shut my computer off. Okay. Sorry about that interruption. Go ahead.
For you, Chairman Danielson, there are no specifics set forth in terms of the height or the construction of the berm, and we would be looking at how we could best accommodate that recommendation on the site, given our intent, obviously, to maintain a developable area that's adequate and still represents good planning.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from committee members?
Excuse me, Chair Danielson. Mr. Hoskins, sorry, does wish to ask a question. I'll bring him in.
Okay.
There's Mr. Hoskins now.
Great. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, good
We can.
afternoon, Mr. Hoskins. You have a
Thank you.
question?
Sorry about the confusion. I didn't decline to speak, and so I'm hoping I have an opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes, if that's okay.
Yes, you absolutely do. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you, committee members. And thank you for taking the time to consider our application today. My name's Eric Hoskins. I'm the president of the Miller Lake Conservation Association. That association is an incorporated not-for-profit association that really only has one objective. Its sole objective is the protection and preservation of the lake and lands surrounding Miller Lake. I want to thank you for your stewardship and good governance of the county. My wife and I came to the area 30 years ago as locum doctors. Both of us are physicians. We practiced at the Haliburton Hospital and the local family practice unit, and we fell in love with the area. We bought our first cottage on Three Brothers Lake and now enjoy year-round our family cottage on Miller Lake. And the roughly 10 cottage owners on Miller Lake, we all care deeply about the environment and work hard to preserve it. We have strong covenants that are attached to the lake and registered on title for each property that were actually introduced by landowner Grace Boyce when she first sold the lots on the lake in the 1990s. And then we've strengthened those covenants over the years. For example, it's a no-motor lake. We're not able to use chemicals and other substances in our cottages that could harm the lake or the ecosystem. We have a larger setback. We can't cut down live trees. Our docks must be floating and they are limited in size. So I hope that in some sense helps you understand our objective. In 2014, we actually came together as cottagers and purchased, again from Grace Boyce, the entire north shore of the lake so that it would remain untouched and undeveloped. It is zoned managed forest, and we're protecting many old growth trees in that managed forest area. So we purchased the current 200 or approximately 200 acre property on the south side of the lake, the one we're discussing today, to further preserve and protect the area around the lake. We immediately attached the same covenants to the lot, but the only way we could make the purchase tenable was to take out a private mortgage with Barry Boyce, the seller, for half of the value, with the intent to pay off the mortgage through this one severance. This is the last remaining developable lot on the lake, and we were determined to do it right and consistent with our conservation aims. So on behalf of the Miller Lake Conservation Association, I'm simply asking you to take into consideration this background and our positive intent when making a decision. I truly believe that your county planner, and I want to congratulate Ms. Bishop, who has, I believe, provided an elegant solution. But I truly believe that your planner has presented a fair and, in her words, balanced approach that would allow approval, one that would have 16 conditions, including our commitment that we're happy to provide to restrict any further development or future development on the retained nearly 200 acres beyond this one severance. We support all 16 conditions. And in considering our application, I would further, and in conclusion, ask that you take into account Dysart's consideration of the quarry buffer themselves, their requirement for an aggregate resource impact report, and their satisfaction that it would neither hinder the continued use of the pit nor be incompatible with the pit for reasons of public health, public safety, or environmental impact. As your planner has indicated, the actual pit site, which has been the case for the past 50 years, if not longer, is more than 300 meters from the subject lot. And the presence of the pit has never been an issue to any of the cottagers on the lake. There are already, as was mentioned, several residential properties within the 300-meter buffer, some of them very recently developed. We do have, as was mentioned, existing development rights for the subject land, so we could, in theory, sell the property and the new owner could build a cottage precisely subject to building permit and approvals from the municipality, but could build a cottage precisely where we were asking today. But we feel that through severance, it will actually provide the municipality and the county and ourselves with many more safeguards and bring the new lot in line with existing regulations and bylaws and plans, providing an even greater protection and oversight of the development of the site. So we're prepared to restrict, as I mentioned, any future development of the residual almost 200 acres by designating it as open space, as is recommended in the balanced approach by your staff report. The staff report recommends 16 conditions. We accept all 16 conditions. We think this is a fair approach, and I thank you for taking the time today to consider it.
Thank you, Mr. Hoskins. First, I very much appreciate the work that you and your wife do as doctors in our community, and very much also appreciate the approach that you've taken to stewardship of the lake. Do members of the committee have any questions for Mr. Hoskins? Member Snyder?
Not a question. Thank you. Just like to say thank you for that background information.
So if there are no further questions, it would appear that we have a choice, and that be to go with the initial recommendation of refusal of part of the applications, or acceptance with the conditions as outlined by Ms. Bishop. So I'm not quite sure how to proceed with, I guess I'm looking for a feeling of how, what direction the committee wants to come from. Rather than go through a motion and turn it down and then go through another motion, let's decide which motion we'd like to bring forward. Member McKelvey, then Member Snyder.
I would like to support the separate lot with the conditions outlined by staff.
Okay, Member Snyder, I'm seeing nodding.
Thank you. I'm the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, so are you prepared then, Member McKelvey and Snyder, to move for approval of the application and receipt of the report?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Moved by Member McKelvey, seconded by Member Snyder. Be it resolved that the Land Division Committee of the County of Haliburton receive the report related to applications for consent H-03325 and H-03425, and that the Land Division Committee for the County of Haliburton grant provisional approval of the application for consent H-03325, subject to the conditions of approval, and that the Land Division Committee for the County of Haliburton grant provisional approval of the application for consent H-03425, subject to the conditions of approval. And I'll now ask for a recorded vote. Member McKelvey?
Yes.
Member Donald?
Yes.
Member Snyder?
Yes.
Chair Danielson?
Yes. That's carried.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you for your input. Much appreciated. Just a notice of Member McKelvey.
I apologize for this. I wasn't expecting our meeting to be quite this long. I have an appointment to give blood at 3:30 out of town, so I'm going to need to leave the meeting. You still have a quorum, but with your permission, I'd like to leave.
Yes, we do still have a quorum, so thank you. Thank you for your service. Just with respect to the notice of decisions that we've made today, a written notice of committee's decisions for all applications will be provided in accordance with the Planning Act. There is a 20-day appeal period following the date of decision, during which any prescribed person or public body may appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. It's a matter of information. Under other business, we have been given a report with meeting dates for 2026. Hard to say at this point in time whether we have any conflicts with those dates, but I believe they're, although I'm not looking at them right now, they're basically on the same Mondays that we normally have our meetings, and with the exception of holidays. Any comments?
Standard.
Do you need a resolution with respect to the meeting dates, or just a receipt for information?
So through you, Chair Danielson, just the only note being that the Tuesday, October 13th we'll have a meeting that day. It's after Thanksgiving.
Right.
Everything else meets the sort of the regular second Monday of the month. And then the only other note is that this will be the end of our term of council. So our last meeting of this term of council will be Monday, November 9th. And then we will be on hiatus until local councils appoint their new members to the Land Division Committee. But I do have a resolution to sort of approve those dates. If the committee is sort of concerned that they don't have the kind of everybody here to confirm that, we can just receive as well. So I leave that in the hands of the committee.
Well, I think we can pass a resolution, and if
Yep.
you know, if there needs to be a change at some point in time, we can do that.
Yep.
Could I have a mover and a seconder then? Member Donald and Member Snyder.
All right. Moved by Member Donald, seconded by Member Snyder. Be it resolved that the Land Division Committee of the County of Haliburton receive the report Proposed Land Division Committee Meeting Schedule 2026, and that the Land Division Committee approves the meeting dates outlined herein for the 2026 committee calendar year.
All in favor? That's
Perfect.
carried. And our next meeting date is December the 8th.
Yes, I think we've just got a single application in the pipeline for December at this time. But yeah, otherwise we'll get our was the committee satisfied to get their notices a little bit earlier? I sent them out when I circulated the other sort of agencies and that kind of thing. That was my practice at my former municipality, and I just didn't know if the committee preferred having that heads up or if I'm spending you too much email.
I wouldn't say you're sending us too much email.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to get as much notice of, or nice to get the agendas as soon as we can, so we can
Yep.
consider the applications. Unless you know, the members have any other comments to make on that. The question that I did have actually came from Member McKelvey about the recorded vote. It has always been the practice of the Land Division, as long as I've been on it, to take a recorded vote, as is the practice, or has been the practice for our Committee of Adjustment in Algonquin Highlands. I'm not quite sure whether we consider this an official recorded vote under the procedural bylaw or not, but you know, do you have any comment on that? It seems to me that, you know, when we're making decisions of this magnitude, that it is a good idea to take a recorded vote to make sure that, you know, it's clear, you know, where each member stands. But I just wondered if you had any comment on that, either Kim or Elizabeth.
So to that, I believe, and certainly Elizabeth can clarify for me. I know certainly kind of pre-COVID, I'm not entirely certain that it was a recorded vote because everybody was in the same room and it was sort of a raise of hands unless somebody asked for that. I do think in the post-COVID era, obviously with people being, you know, electronically in the meetings, there can be a value in making sure that we're sort of adequately capturing people's sort of positions on things. As the secretary treasurer of the committee, I have no concerns doing it either way. So whatever kind of pleases the committee. I don't believe I'm not sure that our procedural bylaw requires a recorded vote, but I do believe that was something that came into effect for virtual meetings, was just as a practice, because it made sure that all voices were heard at the table, you know, whether somebody was off on the computer screen over here or in the room.
I do know that at our Algonquin Highlands Committee of Adjustment, we do take a recorded vote when we're making decisions on applications specifically. Things like accepting the agenda, passing the minutes or not, but it's always been our practice. And I know it did catch you a little off guard at the last meeting. So I just thought, and Tammy did ask, you know, is this an officially recorded vote? You know, when you're at a council meeting and you say, I'd like a recorded vote, there's usually an issue associated with that.
Yeah.
But I can see the value both ways.
So I record them as recorded votes in our minutes. So you'll see when you review them that there's, if anybody was against or anybody was for, that does show up. Yeah, no, it caught me by surprise just because it was my first time doing it. So I have now that I know to expect it, I have absolutely no concerns if the committee you know, prefers it done that way to ensure that, you know, we make it absolutely clear where everybody stands.
I think it's a good practice. Elizabeth, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to add that if committee would like, we can look at the procedural bylaw to see what it says in this regard, if it says anything, and report back at our December meeting. And then you'll have all the information if you want to keep current practice, or if you'd like to just go to a general vote for each application. I know municipalities, it differs across the board. Some don't record a vote, an individual vote, some do. So it might, depending on what our procedural bylaw says, it might just be whatever committee would want moving forward.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to hearing, just sort of touching on it at our next meeting. Doesn't sound like it's going to be a barn burner, but that depends on, the application that comes in.
I hope it's not a barn burner, but
I personally prefer the recorded vote specifically because we
Yeah.
are meeting via Zoom, and I can see that there's value with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other business that we need to discuss? Okay, I then would ask for a motion to adjourn. Mover and a seconder. Member Donald and Member Snyder.
moved by Member Donald, seconded by Member Snyder. Be it resolved that the November 10th, 2025 Land Division Committee meeting be hereby adjourned at 2:40 p.m.
All in favor?
Okay.
We stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Enjoy
Thank
the
you,
best.
committee.
See you later.
Well done.